Hello and welcome to the Motherhood Village podcast. I am on with a very special guest. I have Dr. Celine Hamilton, who is a highly regarded child and adolescent psychiatrist and the medical director of the CATS Behavioral Unit Health Unit at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. Trained in the Triple Board Residency Program at Mount Sinai Medical Center, Dr. Hamilton specializes in pediatrics, adult psychiatry, and child and adolescent psychiatry, with a deep understanding of normal child development and the medical conditions that can affect children. Dr. Hamilton's primary focus is identifying, diagnosing, and treating mental health concerns that deviate from the expected developmental path. As a child and adolescent psychiatrist, Dr. Hamilton's main goal is to truly listen to her patients and their families. She believes in building strong working relationships that lead to tangible changes for her parents and their families, bringing her great satisfaction in her work. How are you, Dr. Hamilton?
Good morning. Well, thank you so very much for having me. I feel really privileged to, be invited to speak today. You make me sound like more than I am. Thank you for having me, and hopefully, I can be of help.
Absolutely. No, I'm very excited to talk to you about this. I know you are. You're a pretty big deal. I was like, wow, like I was talking about this episode all week to my husband, to my friends. Okay, but let's dive into it. So, resources. It sounds like you and I both believe that it kind of takes a village, right? Working together, community connection to help families, which then passes on to the children. One of the resources I always like to ask my guests is what is their favorite book or one that they would like to recommend? It could even be a podcast. Some people are like, oh, I like audiobooks, whatever you feel, but any resources you'd like to share with my moms listening today.
Well, I definitely use audiobooks because I drive a lot and I run a lot. And so I love to learn. I'm currently rereading a book that I think moms should all read, and it's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it is a fantastic book about the fact that our intellect is not static. So, we have all heard of this IQ test, and we think, okay, that there's this box that we fit into, and that's our IQ. But in fact, that's not true. Our IQs can change, we can get smarter. And that is the whole idea behind growth mindset. And I think every parent should read this book. It's amazing. And I'm rereading it because it's an amazing book. For those of us who are also getting older, I most recently read a book by Peter Attia, who is a surgeon, a surgical oncologist, but it's basically about how we can live our best lives physically and cognitively into our 90s and 100s. And it's a really important book. So, and they're both great reads, easy reads, great reads. So
I love it.
For our moms and aging parents.
Yes, I love that. And I didn't read it in the bio, but are you a mother yourself?
I am.
Okay.
I have an almost 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, second grade and seventh grade.
Wow. So you're in the thick of the elementary and middle school. Oh, we could probably have a whole conversation about that.
We could have a whole podcast about middle school.
Yeah. One of the moms in my mom group yesterday said, yeah, I have a middle schooler. She's like, and it's already. So, okay, let's dive into that, because I want to ask you, and not so much focusing on the back to school, but being a parent of someone who just started, my little guy started kindergarten just 2 weeks ago. I'm pretty attuned with him, and we have big emotions, we have big tantrums, we have, just almost rage that I've seen in various levels when he's tired, when he's hungry, but this is now coming out a little bit differently. So my question to you is, can you talk about what happens with children when big transitions occur, like maybe starting a new school with new routines? And that could be young children and teens. I would believe it's similar, just maybe different reactions. So that's kind of how I want to start this, because I'm right in the thick of it. And I know a lot of moms are as well.
Right. So obviously, there are a lot of feelings that happen when summer ends, right? You've had a really good time. You haven't had pressure, particularly from the younger ones who've never really been to school per se. There's that anxiety of something new. For the older ones, there's dread, performance anxiety, a lot of social anxiety. It's quite a disparate age group we're talking about, so it's going to be hard to separate it out. But yes, big emotions. And the most important thing that I could say about it is children need to have their emotions validated. They need to feel heard. So if your child is having big emotions, a quote unquote tantrum, let's say, bring them into the fold. Of course you feel upset. You
Yeah.
must be feeling exhausted. You must be feeling tired. They're probably overwhelmed. It's incredibly stimulating. It is very hard for a little child to focus for that long in a class and try and attend. It takes a huge amount of energy.
Yeah.
So by the time they get home, they've been trying to hold it together all day long and they just let it out. And sometimes they just need to cry, and that's okay. And reassuring them that those big emotions are okay. It's okay to cry. It's
Yeah.
okay to feel frustrated. Give them cuddles, love them through those tears, because that helps them learn to self-regulate. The more soothing and you talk to them, they learn that it's okay to be upset and that they can calm down and that they will calm down when they're having real tantrums about, you know, things like, do I want my eggs scrambled or fried
Yes.
or
Sure.
whatever, poached? Give them choices.
Yeah.
You can have this or that. Which one is it going to be? Try and make things concrete, black and white. But key is get them to bed on time, soothing bedtime routine, warm, even if even if you don't care if they're clean, warm bath
Yeah.
will absolutely help. Warm milk if they like milk. Make sure and brush their teeth after that. Bedtime story routine, routine, routine. Remind them before they go to school. Here's something that you can think about. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the end of the day. I can't wait to see your smiling
Yeah.
face at the end of the day. Things that will help them stay connected. Okay, I'm going to see her at the end of the day, right? For the adolescents or the ones going into middle school, these are, and we're going to talk about this later,
Sure.
the
Yes.
phones and the media, they must get sleep. They must get sleep. And this is something that is a struggle for every parent. As a child gets more into adolescence, their circadian rhythm changes. It is a natural thing that they want to go to bed later and sleep later, but we have to rage against the machine and try and get sleep, because school starts too early, particularly for high school, far too early. And
Yeah.
in Florida, legislation has changed. It will be starting later in a few years. And that's great because they need the sleep. It's very important for mental health, for focus, attention. The research has shown that kids who get even an hour more sleep a night, their grades go up, their standardized test scores go up, and certainly their mood improves.
And let me ask, and to tie it back to the adolescents and the teens, because truthfully, I don't think we give enough resources to moms in that age bracket. I think and which is great on social media, different experts coming, and it's like that zero new mom's pregnant, and then it's like maybe it's a 4 or 5, and then school age children, it's like bye.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to kind of stay with that, but I want to say, so once I started realizing that my son, okay, there's some overstimulation, I was like, all right, we got to get him active. It's a little hot outside to maybe go outside. So we're putting him into some like ninja gymnastics going forward and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
For the parents of adolescents, tweens, teens, and maybe even because I could imagine up until maybe even 5th grade, maybe middle school, kids might want to be in tune to that. But for the parents, for the tweens, let's say, that don't want to, or teens, how do we get them active? How do we get them to kind of decompress after they've had these days? Like you mentioned, and I know we're going to talk even more deeper about the social media, the screen time. But yeah, I guess how can you help regulate them or help them calm down? Whereas my little guy can send him to ninja gymnastics, he can run around and kind
Mm-hmm.
of let it out. What do you suggest for the parents of the adolescents and the teens?
Right. So at the risk of making a recommendation that's unrealistic and slash that I might not be even able to do myself, this is a recommendation I think is very important, that, well, first of all, that the family eat together with no screens. That is a time when they can talk to you about the stressors,
Sure.
what went well, what went poorly. But actually, it's really good to take a walk outside after dinner, even if it's really hot. It's good for your blood sugar. It's good to get out in nature. Nature is calming. It's good to get out in the dusk when the sun is at a certain level of the sky, because it sets your brain to be prepared to create melatonin, which will set you up to go to bed. It is something that, exercise in itself, is something that will reduce stress. So, eating together without screens on and taking a walk after dinner. Now, half of the parents are going to say, but my kids are in extracurricular activities and we're shoving the food in and, they're in their sports,
Rushing.
etc.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
rushing. Well, maybe trying to schedule that in a certain number of times a week. Try it once a week first, on a Friday night, maybe. Start small. All habits should start very, very small and doable. Otherwise, when they're too big, we can't do them, right? So start very, very small, because once the family realizes, oh, this is kind of nice, we get to talk and catch up and look at the pretty leaves or whatever it is, they'll realize that they feel more connected, they feel more settled and grounded. They have a chance to talk about things that they wouldn't necessarily talk about if they were all hanging around, everybody in their phone in the living room.
Sure. And I don't know if it was the Surgeon General or the Academy of Pediatrics, but I know there's been a lot of statistics coming out of when it introduced screen time, and I think they've even pushed it out later. But again, like you were saying, for the sake of practicality and the real world, and sometimes things, let's talk about screen time, phone.
Right.
My husband wants to put my little guy into coding school, and I'm like, I don't want to do that till maybe he's 7, 8, maybe a little bit older, because he's still too young. I'm like,
how
that's
old
still
is he?
focus. He's 6. He'll be 6 in November.
Right.
I think they start, but go ahead. I want you to tell me what are the dangers? You hear people say, oh, but we watch TV every morning. We watch TV, our generation. We might not have had the phone, but we were exposed. Let's talk about that.
Right. Okay. So first of all, the job of a child is to play. Children learn social skills, physical regulation, attention, everything from play. They're almost, I mean, I refused to put any of those learning app things when my kids were toddlers. There was no learning.
Yeah.
There was playing.
Yeah.
There were I wasn't teaching them anything. I refused to teach my child when she was in preschool or whatever. She doesn't know her numbers and her colors. I said, I don't care, because she needs to play. That's her job. The longer you can postpone screens, the better, because every fun screen thing is a dopamine hit that causes a little bit of an addiction, and then they want more. This is the reason that I suggest delaying phones for as long as possible. My philosophy is basically, until your child is not attended by an adult, is not under adult supervision for any period of time, then they don't need a phone, right? Because technically there's an adult who's looking after them, who can help them.
Sure.
Right? Now, there are also parents who decide to wait even longer, because when we were kids, we didn't have phones all the time. We took the bus without a phone, right? Things have changed.
Yes.
Things have changed, right? I have a nephew who lives in another country, and he walks for half an hour to school every day. Now, granted, he does actually have a phone, but kids do different things at different times.
Sure.
He didn't used to have a phone, and he still walked to school. So I decided that my child, once she was not under the supervision of an adult at all times, that she could have a phone. And that was why I chose to allow her to have a phone. Now, so how do we make that decision? This is what I would suggest parents think about. Does the child need a smartphone or a phone to stay connected to you for emergencies? i.e., is there not another adult around? Do they know what kind of apps are okay or not okay to download? And that means, do mom and dad know, right? So mom and dad have homework to do. And I'm just like all of them. I didn't, psychiatry residency doesn't train you in this.
Sure.
Right? Do they know how to surf the web safely? Do they know who it's okay to communicate with and who not? Do they know what they should or shouldn't share online? Do they know what kinds of words or pictures should or should not be sent? Do they respect your rules in other ways? Or do they have a hard time with that? Do they have an understanding of voice and text and data limits? Because not all of us have unlimited data
Sure.
on our plans, right? Do they understand how to take care of a phone and not lose it? There are a lot of responsibilities that a parent needs to think about, and there's going to be a lot of pressure that they feel from their child.
Yeah.
I've definitely met parents, and there are parents who've withheld phones for far longer, until freshman year, et cetera. But some parents do end up having a child who feels ostracized, or not just ostracized, but really left out because they can't communicate with their friends about things to do, and their friends sort of forget to include them. And it's not intentional, but they end up at a disadvantage. So, it is a modern world, and we do have to weigh those questions, but it's very important to take a real hard look at whether your child needs it, and if they're ready, and whether the parent themselves knows to educate their child.
And I think, and that's just the screen time. That's not even the social media aspect, which I know could be a
Right.
whole another thing, but I want to tie it because I know we're limited on time. Depression and anxiety, and I'm sure it's all related, has been increasing. Children, tweens, teens. When I hear stories of suicide, I'm like, what is going on? I fear. What are some of the causes of this increase, and what are signs and symptoms that parents should look out for, even for the little ones? What is normal tantrum and seeing rage to someone who is really struggling, being bullied? Let's dive into that, I guess, as best as we can, because I'm sure we can have a full long conversation on just that. But let's talk a little bit about that.
So there, yes, there is an increasing suicide attempts, and suicidal ideation, and depression and anxiety in general are increasing in children. It's a crisis. And, we're all asking ourselves, what is going on? Why is this? And, there are a lot of different components. And I think things were worsening probably even before COVID. COVID obviously played a role. In South Florida, COVID is still playing a role, and in the world, right? Because our children missed out on a year in school. They had to do online. So a lot of them either struggled there, or they struggled and actually didn't learn. And then they've been reintegrated, but are behind. So they had some school failure going on and some catch up. A lot of them became very socially anxious. A lot of them lost friends and became very isolated. A lot of them really were sort of afraid for the state of the world, and it threw them into in a way adulthood in a way that they hadn't been before, and it was unexpected for them. There are some things about COVID, for instance, in South Florida. A lot of people moved to Florida, and a lot of people's rents increased, and a lot of people got priced out of their homes. There's been a lot of financial hardship as a result of COVID, and a lot of people don't really talk about that. Financial hardship for children in a family is very stressful, very, very stressful. So parents losing their jobs or having to move because their rent was tripled is really difficult, and people forget about that. Now, this massive increase in mental health needs has also squeezed the resources that we have, right? We don't necessarily have more resources just because we have a mental health crisis. I mean, there are some more, but people have a very hard time finding mental health care. And so they're going without. And so people are without treatment, things are just worsening and worsening. And that's a real problem, right? Because then we don't get care until we go to the emergency room already, suicidal. But the other thing, to take into account is social media, gaming, screen time, phones. COVID did have an impact on the use of screens in all of society, right? For good and for bad. And children are now on those phones and addicted, right? And they're up really late at night, and they can become extremely sleep deprived. And for me, sleep is extremely important. It's so important to mental health and to function in school and society. And children are extremely sleep deprived, and that causes mental illness. It does. Another good book is Why We Sleep by Chris Walker. Fascinating, amazing book by the sleep expert of the world. Sleep deprivation is deadly in so many ways. Now, you don't even have to be on significant social media apps to suffer from cyberbullying. You can just be on a group text and have the worst bullying and the worst problems, right? A WhatsApp chat group where kids are being nasty, or excluding you or the bullying has become very sophisticated, but it doesn't have to be on any sort of sophisticated social media app for it to happen. The comparison to other people on, Instagram and things like that, where people look perfect or seem perfect or have more likes or friends or et cetera, that is damaging ultimately to self-esteem, but it doesn't even have to be that deep for it to be cutting, right? You could just be in your WhatsApp group of 6 friends and be excluded, right? Part of the problem that I've seen in my work on my inpatient unit is that when I see children who have gotten access to phones earlier, because they, developmentally, their judgment and decision-making abilities are still really evolving, they don't really evaluate risks and consequences very well. So children are very easily groomed or very easily pressured into doing things that, well, they either don't know better or they do know better, and they do it against their better judgment. But I've met too many children who are sending pictures of themselves in compromising positions, and then the picture gets out. So many children, more than I could count, that I see on my child psychiatry inpatient unit with suicidal ideation. Not always because that gets leaked, but it's in the mix, right? Decisions that were not, made in the best of circumstances. Children who are vulnerable to, cyberbullying are children who might be struggling with mood problems in the first place, who might already have social anxiety, who might be going through family difficulties, a divorce, who are in difficult boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, gay, lesbian, bi, trans, queer, everybody. That population is especially high risk. There's a lot of discrimination. There's just a lot of difficulty for them. And so there, I do see quite a high number of, LGBTQ kids on my unit as well.
Sure. And so a parent listening to this, like immediately we think fear, right? We're like, whew, there's a lot of information there. What it sounds like to me is, number one, if you're going to expose your children to social media, have real, true, honest, transparent conversations. That's point blank number one. And if you can't, then they probably shouldn't get the phone or have access to the social media. I know as an adult, we can have our imposter syndrome with social media and all the things of looking at it, comparing ourselves. I can only imagine to a child, as you said, whose prefrontal cortex isn't even completely fully developed, and all the things that come along with the brain development, right? But what are some signs and symptoms? So let's say someone listening is like, oh, but no, family life is good. My child wakes up, smiles on their face, all is well in the world. You have those instances where the mother's like, I didn't know. I had no clue that they were struggling. Let's talk about those instances. What are some signs and symptoms?
Right. So the first thing I want to tell you is, yes, there are those parents who say, I had no clue, because children do hide it from their parents. So I want all the moms who are listening to know that children don't want to upset you. They don't want to make waves. They might not want to tell you not because they don't love you or you're not doing a good job, but because they kind of want to protect you and kind of want to maintain the status quo, right? But, signs that they might be depressed or suicidal. So loss of interest in their usual, their originally well-liked activities, like their sports or their art or things like that. Withdrawal from friends, from family, from teachers they may have liked. Somatic symptoms, so stomach aches, headaches, school refusal, fatigue, just generalized fatigue. So, sleeping a lot or not at all, eating a lot or not at all, sort of changes. So refusing school, like I mentioned, but also grades dropping, or decline in the quality of the schoolwork. That can really be an important sign that, for parents to pick up. Depression can kind of, it's like it causes cognitive impairments, really. It
Yeah.
causes poor concentration, lack of motivation, forgetfulness, fatigue. I sometimes tell the kids on my unit, depression makes you stupid. You read the same thing over and over and over again, and you forget.
Yeah.
It makes it really hard. And parents sometimes think like, oh, you're being lazy or you're this or you're that, but actually something more might be going on. Obviously, if your child is making open statements like, I wish I was dead, or, I won't be a problem for you much longer, obviously you want to take that seriously, if they seem sad and down. And, children with low self-esteem or, can be particularly vulnerable. So those are some of the signs and symptoms that, that withdrawal, that decrease in function. Sometimes kids will, stop even wanting to shower. They don't dress the same way they used to. They're irritable. They drop all their friends, things like that.
And I would imagine what I'm also hearing is because I can hear the parents say, oh, like you said, they're lazy. And it's like, I would imagine
Mm-hmm.
it also boils down to, your child, go by your instinct. A lot of parents don't want to rock the boat. Maybe they think the relationship is
Mm-hmm.
going to change if they keep pushing. But from
Right,
what you're saying is like, if you see any kind of change, push, and try and really
right,
understand what is
right.
going on.
Right. And so, yeah, tips for parents are the most important is do not be afraid to ask your child,
Yes.
because your child may be afraid to tell you or not want to rock the boat, right? And we can't have both people not wanting to rock the boat. Somebody has to rock the boat, right?
Sure.
So don't be afraid to ask your child, say, are you feeling down or depressed? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Have you
Yeah.
ever thought about it? Take them seriously, don't sort of shrug them off. If they say, I want to kill myself, don't just necessarily shrug it off as being dramatic, listen to them, watch how they're behaving, encourage them to spend, like, try and draw them out, try and bring them, get them to do things with you, take them out. I think it's really important to just talk about, in terms of prevention, like healthy lifestyle. I personally feel that, for instance, exercise is suicide prevention. I feel that from as early as humanly possible, we should have our children involved in organized sports.
Yes.
It not just facilitates physical fitness and all of those, healthy hormones, et cetera, but it's socialization. It's a peer group, teaches children to deal with failure and to pick themselves back up, to persevere, and it maintains a healthy body. And it's really very important. I definitely consider it to be suicide prevention. Also, healthy nutrition. So, not having children, drink sugar. So, no, juice, as a pediatrician, I discourage. It's liquid calories. It doesn't provide any nutritional value, and it can cause emotional dysregulation. Same with sugar cereals and candy. Now, I love candy, but we
Who
were only
doesn't?
allowed sugar cereal once a year in my house when I was little, and we don't have it in my house now. You
Sure.
obviously have to choose your battles, but healthy food is going to help your child function. When I found out recently, a suicidal patient of mine, lives on Lucky Charms, I was very chagrined, because
Yeah.
that's not going to help her mood,
Sure.
right?
But that's the education of parents not understanding that your diet, that's again a whole nother conversation. How, yeah, we're very big on that as well. And like you said, you could pick your battles. Thankfully, I think there's better companies out there doing better things.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
to round this up, your you're a physician, look, you say you have suicidal patients that you have. If you can sum it up for the mommies listening and the dads, parents listening, what are some things that you say, listen, if there's anything you're going to take from this conversation, let's do a recap. X, Y, Z. And then also, can people connect with you? I know you're at Joe DiMaggio. I guess, do you see patients through Joe DiMaggio, or is it more of like an emergency thing? I guess it's kind of like a two-part, how you want to end this and kind of recap and say, look, parents, know
Right.
this. And then part
Right.
two, do you see, outside patients
Right.
through Joe
Right.
DiMaggio?
Right. So I'm an inpatient psychiatrist. So if your child is brought to the Joe DiMaggio emergency department and they're admitted to my unit, that's where I work. And so I see who is admitted to my inpatient unit. Takeaways for parents: communicate with your child, monitor their social media use, make sure they sleep. If your child is already in treatment and on medication, you control that medication, not your child. Make sure that no children in the house have access to any pills. All pills should be locked up and stored because children are impulsive. So monitor that, store away firearms, alcohol, make your home a safe place. If your child is anxious or depressed, you can check with your insurance for providers, talk to your pediatrician, talk to the school counselor, call 211. If your child is expressing, that they're suicidal, that's a time to make either an urgent appointment with a counselor. If they've made a suicide attempt, that's when you call 911 or bring them to the emergency department, right? It's important to communicate with your child so you can make sure and prevent this from happening. When you see warning signs, to act then, right? Before something happens.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamilton. I feel like I could have kept talking. I had so many questions of, like, raising kids is not for the faint of heart. It's hard. There's
Yeah.
a lot of outside factors, but thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing some really, really great tips. I'll put all this in the show notes of just different resources that are available through Joe DiMaggio as well as the Memorial Healthcare Systems. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate your having me. I appreciate it. It's very flattering. Thank you.
Thank you.